Well, my pleasure to welcome to the studio the love doctor himself, Whānau Jacobs from Family Life. You're getting used to the title, getting an honorary doctorate from Rhema Media?
Well, we're having a bit of a play around with that. One of my team members actually suggested I get a number plate LUV DOC.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm not quite ready for that yet.
Yeah, and you know, perhaps get a stethoscope and pose for it on your website, etc.
Calm down, Andrew. Thank you very much.
So what's new at Family Life? What's new with the team there?
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, the world's sort of been turned upside down with COVID, which I guess, fortunately, we haven't been impacted at Family Life in too much of a bad way. In fact, the things we were prioritizing in the digital space, we could just throw all our energy in because we didn't have the events during those 3 months. So I mentioned this last week, but the podcast is live. That's going. It's gaining some momentum. We've just had 2 people join our team in the office that will help on videos. So a bit of a teaser, but maybe later this year or early next year, there'll be some new video content, maybe like an online course being released. So we're excited about that.
No, very excited indeed. You got your own media department.
Well, that's happening.
And seriously, if you need to borrow a stethoscope for one of the shoots, I'm happy to let
I'll know where to knock.
Exactly. Hey, the questions that we get through, and hey, it would certainly encourage anybody listening to the program. If you have a question on love and relationships, then do get in touch with us. You can text 8168, first word Rhema, or you can email days@rhema.co.nz. And well, some of the questions that come through are tougher than others. Whānau, this week, this is a particularly tough question, and we're not really going to be able to solve everybody's problems within the window that we have. But I also know that this is an issue which affects so many marriages and relationships in New Zealand. I'll just read the question now. It says, when I got married, I knew that my husband was a recovering addict. He went to his addiction group weekly and seemed to be on top of things. However, in the last year, things have gone from bad to worse for us, and he has fallen back into his coping mechanism of his addiction. This is destructive, to say the least, and while I understand addiction, I don't want to stand by anymore. Any suggestions on where I go from here?
Yeah, well, you're right. We won't solve the whole problem in 10 minutes, but maybe some thoughts for our listeners to think about. And in fact, when I was 3 or 4 years ago, when I was writing the book, Connection, A Journey Towards Intimacy, one of the topics dealt with addiction. And boy, let me tell you, that was by far the hardest chapter that we wrote, and we sort of rehashed that, spoke to a lot of people that went through that. But one of the things, and actually last night I was reading the book, going through it. But one of the things that really stood out around this topic of addiction is, I think addiction is not really what we've commonly believed it is. So a lot of people think addiction is a substance hook, so a chemical hook to a substance. But it turns out, in some studies they did, they call it rat park study. They would actually put these rats in a cage, and then they would test them with plain water and drug water, and then they would go back drinking the drug water until they die. Someone came back and revisited that test, and they actually found that, well, if we created Rat Park, think Rattopia, so put not a rat in isolation in its cage, but they actually had a community of rats with all the rat wheels and
all the cool things rats love to do, right?
Everything you could imagine, and the community. This time around, they would actually go and drink from the drug water, and they would leave that and they would drink the plain water.
Wow.
So what they found in that sort of revised study was that it's not actually the chemical hook, but what that did was it was a numbing of the pain, the pain of not having community, the pain of disconnection. And so the guys, the experts that write about this on the topic, medical doctors, researchers, there's in particular a journalist called Johan Harry, who's grown up in an addicted family, in an addicted space. They would phrase it this way, that addiction is maybe not so much linked to a substance hook, but rather it's a numbing of pain.
It's a coping strategy to get through whatever life throws at you. And I mean, going through COVID-19 anecdotally, people who were doing fine up until that point some have fallen back into some of the bad habits just to get through life, self-medicating psychologically, perhaps.
Yeah. And I guess the question then to ask is not why the addiction, but why the pain? So, okay, how does this relate to our listener? Because now you're faced with this reality that I'm in a relationship with someone who's gone back to that coping mechanisms. But in essence, you need to realize excuse me, that this coping mechanism is a numbing of the pain.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, disconnecting from that partner will add to the pain, so it will only add to the problem. But at the same time, if my partner is abusing, substances, or whatever the case or the severity might be, that's impacting our relationship, and that's impacting our health as a couple.
And another way of looking at things is this can be seen particularly by the partner who is making allowances for the struggling addict. This is a betrayal. This is a breakdown of trust. They said they wouldn't do it, and now they're back doing it.
Exactly. So there's that breakdown of trust, but the catch-22 is if I now disconnect, it will just spiral down further. So there's this tension of, as someone you love, you actually want to love them through their pain, but you don't want to be the enabler, because in addictions you get that enabling aspect of it. I like to think of it as a garden. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you think about boundaries, the concept about boundaries. Think about your backyard, and you've got a beautiful garden with some fruit trees, and you've got a gate out there. Yep. You invite people into your garden. You all enjoy the fruit. You enjoy a lovely time in your garden, your well-kept garden.
This is quite a good biblical metaphor as well, especially with the fruit. But anyway,
it is. No, you're right. It is. But think about that as a garden, and think about the boundary as the fence surrounding the garden.
Yeah.
Now, say this garden didn't have a fence. You'd have the wild animals just coming in and eating your crops, eating your fruit, and you'd have nothing left to enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay, so a good boundary is not necessarily only there to keep people out. A good boundary is there to make sure that what we have, our garden, flourishes. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, so bear with me.
Yeah.
So in this context, I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to her decision. Yeah. Or his decision. I'm not sure if this is
It's a woman talking about her husband.
Woman talking about her husband. Thank you. So it's going to come down to her decision. If she decides she wants to love her husband through this, which is obviously what she actually promised in her vows, there would need to be some clear boundaries so that the garden can be protected. Otherwise, the addictive, destructive behavior will just wreak havoc on that garden. What do I mean by a boundary? It says, well, we can continue when this happens. So a boundary says, you're not coming into this garden unless you can treat it with respect. So there's always that hope aspect. You're not disconnecting, but you're actually giving them the option. If they're not going to change their behavior that's destructive to this garden, there will be no more relationship.
And the pain of the consequences needs to be stronger than the push of the coping mechanism.
Exactly. So you're not rejecting them, but you're giving them hope, and you're raising the bar of expectation. So if for any reason now they don't want to come back to the relationship, it was their choice. So they've added to their own pain. Or they can say, well, hold on, this relationship means more to me, and I know I want to experience this love, and I don't want to experience the pain. So what do I need to do to get back into the garden? So I'd say, if you're going to love him through this, you need to set some good boundaries. If there's abuse in place, you need to create some good physical boundaries, and you need to be clear on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Now, I mean, as we said at the beginning, this is a very complicated situation, and it involves unconditional love and also redemption and lots of things here. But certainly I think that's a very good start and some very good advice. And like the plug that you put in there because your book covers it in a whole chapter. So
Yep,
further resources available at Family
Yeah.
Life if people want to get in touch, right?
People can actually go onto Audible, so audible.com, and if they're not subscribed there already, they would be able to download the book for free, the audio version. So it's Vaynant Jacobs' Connection, A Journey Towards Intimacy.
Okay. No, very good indeed. Appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.